Universal law states that one must never initiate aggression and physically violate another's consent for any reason. This agrarian system is based upon universal law. Universal law is at the foundation of all systems and practices. All life processes revolve around the core concept of civility, with the foundational philosophy of universal law. The goal is to reevaluate all relationships and all processes and to make them align with universal law. There are presently systemic principles that are operating outside of universal law, and in updates to the system they will be addressed. I have already said universal law too many times. Also known as natural law, although I think that sounds too much like the law of the jungle, which is literally the opposite of the universal law of civility. The goal is to create a system that gets up off its high horse and does its job of ensuring the well-being of all the people. This can be done automatically by all parts of the system adhering to universal law. If people did not have the option of fault collapsing and failing upon one another through violence, or threats of violence, or threats of, or acts of taking their property, or their right to shelter, for example, and if they had to instead find a solution other than violently seizing the resources of others, then they would find that common solution that we all seek. It is automatic when adhering to universal law in all circumstances. But this world is far from that presently. Those in this world presently routinely and systemically violate universal law. These are foundational spiritual principles. We are all being judged primarily according to our adherence to universal law. That is the primary cosmic test. Our relationship to universal law determines the fate of our souls. It is in no way necessary nor required to fail this test for the survival of your kind. It is possible to achieve success and higher orders of survival and existence without ever resorting to the violation of universal law. Your systems are set up so that there will be immature confrontations with the power structure itself, as though the structure is in a state of such jeopardy that it needs you to or for this, that, or the other thing. It needs you. It cannot survive without you. It needs you to vacate the premises. It needs you to fill a certain role at a certain time, or else it will collapse. It's a very fragile system, one based on undermining its own workforce, working against them all the while, devaluing them instead of supporting them. And then it comes around with examples of violations of universal law such as eviction, as though it is your fault. Some aspect of the system does not require some portion of your services. For whatever reason it can come up with, it has integrated gleeful violations of universal law into its common practices. Humanity needs to define universal law, recognize that it is the core concept of civility and the unspoken foundation of all civilized societies. The reason this concept remains unspoken is that present-day power brokers are ultimately deriving their power through violations of universal law, not to mention the bad practices they continue to indulge in behind closed doors. They are a throwback culture of power worshippers from the past that still retain a primitive relationship with power. The example put forth by the Luciferian eugenicist culture and what they are promoting in our society to push what they do behind closed doors is disgraceful and embarrassing. Theirs must be unchallenged and unchecked power. Rotten. Not in line with basic foundational philosophies and principles to properly run a civilization, yet there they are. We can create a system based entirely upon universal law. A system that shows the higher order example of adhering to universal law under all circumstances. With the principles of universal law taught to every individual from the earliest age. Education should be primarily language, math, and after they understand words, the teaching of universal law. Universal law is the primary concept we must share with one another and should be taught to everyone at a young age. So the goal here is to create a system that is in line with universal law under all circumstances. This will include the reimagining of things such as shelter and housing rights, property rights, and so on, so that no one ever has the experience of having something removed from them. How utterly immature of an example we have been shown here. For example, if a company goes under and you lose your job as a result, that is not your fault. Yet they will not hesitate to continue to charge you rent regardless, and if you can't afford it, they will kick you out. Onto the street. These primitive practices need to come to an end. There will be no more homelessness. There will be no more eviction. We will not ever be subjected to the experience of having things be removed from us unless we commit the only crime of violating universal law and initiating aggression towards another. Only then are our rights affected in any way. And we have the right to shelter as well as the right to a place in a system that is secure and abundance-based, one that is not in desperate need of any physical resource you have attained. We can work out the fine details later. I've already done the work years ago, so it's not a matter of not having concepts on hand for potential solutions. I'm just getting tired of typing right now. I will continue to put forth concepts for a system based upon universal law, and they will continue to drool over their weapons and the size of their mob and look for reasons to justify the violation of universal law. I will provide conceptual solutions to each area of your survival routines to get them in line with universal law, and they will continue to try to perform psychological backflips to justify the violation of universal law. I will continue to try to provide concepts for solutions to this world's repeating, ongoing problems, and they will continue to vilify me for things other than the initiation of aggression and physical violation of the consent of others. It should not be possible to vilify anyone for anything other than the initiation of aggression and physical violation of another's consent. If someone is being vilified for something other than the initiation of aggression and physical violation of another's consent, it is likely that if you go up the chain in order of occurrence far enough, you will find both the problem and the solution are systemic. The core philosophy behind universal law is the test, whether or not we are an animal or a human, whether or not we are civil or uncivilized. These are the measurements being made of us by the cosmic community. If everyone started to starve, would you kill others for their resources? Use your mind to come up with a creative solution to the problem? Or would you starve together? In the long run, your answer to that and other scenarios will determine the direction and the fate of one's soul through one's relationship to universal law. One's adherence to universal law is the barometer for the karmatic test through which the soul can ascend.